This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Baruchim Habayim. Welcome everyone to a special event in honor of the release of the new Sefer, The Concealed and the Revealed. This is what it looks like. It's a beautiful cover. Anyone who said don't judge a book by its cover, never try to sell a book. But cover is very important, and Rabbi Eli Kron at Art Scroll Studios did a magnificent job. The title is courtesy of Avi Moiri, who came up with this title. One day it came to him, so we appreciate the various contributions. And in our last Concealed and Revealed Shir, we discussed the difference between the Lashon HaKodesh Sefer, the Maggid Rakia, and the English book. First, before I begin, I want to thank Chazak for hosting tonight's event. I want to thank my dear friends Rav Ilan Meirav, Rav Yaniv Meirav, my good friend Rabbi Aboff for hosting tonight's event. Chazak does incredible work, especially in the area of enrolling public school students into yeshiva. So whatever you could do to show your support to Chazak, Tavai Aleichem Bracha. Tonight's special event is sponsored by our dear friends at Chickens for Shabbos, who are feeding and supporting those who need it most, to the families of Agunois, Almonois, and Malamdim. And these are Yidden who either they are on their own, and of course the Malamdim are the most important members of the Jewish people. Without them we wouldn't have the next generation. So please go to the Yad Eliezer website and click the icon Almonois, Agunois, Malamdim, and whatever you could do to help these mishpachos. May Hashem always be with your mishpacha and be mashpia on you. Shefa bracha v'hatzlacha for simchas hanachas ad bias goyel tzedek. So last revealed and concealed event, we discussed the difference between the English Sefer and the Lashon HaKodesh Sefer, and I would like to mention today one feature that we have in the New English Sefer is in the acknowledgement section. There is the section dedicated to our beloved grandfather, Rav Mordechai Leib Glatstein, who is very connected to the Yom Tif of Purim. And that's because he was born on Vav Adar in the year 1916, and he was Nichnas Labris on Tainus Esther, and he was named Mordechai Leib, Zikni Mori, Mordechai Leib. He was named after his grandfather, who was the Rav of the city of Linchitz. And what seems to have been prophetically after Mordechai HaTzadik, as his life was the embodiment of the reflective of the life of Mordechai HaTzadik. And we bring in the acknowledgement a number of psukim in the Megillah that are relevant and are parallel to the life of our grandfather, Ki Ha'ish Mordechai Hoylech V'Gadol, that he learned in the city of Plotsk under Rabbi Chol Rubinstein, who was a student of his maternal grandfather, Rav Pesach Moshe Goldman, and then he later received smicha from Rav Shlomo David Kahana, the Rav of Varsha, and he was a ben bayis by Hagoyin Rav Menachem Zemba. And then we bring the pasuk, Achar hadvarim ha'ela Gidal hamelech as Haman. Our grandfather witnessed and experienced the evil of Haman, of the Nazis, of the Germans. He met Amalek face to face. He saw Eichmann, was on the selection line of Dr. Mengele. He saw the Yates Gavoya Chamishim Amma, the Nazi killing machine. But Mordechai lo yichra v'lo yishtachave, never did he lose faith. Never did his Amunah falter. And upon liberation, our Zayda dedicated his life to encouraging, elevating, uplifting the elderly, the Zakenim, the Almanos, the Yesoimim, the brokenhearted, the Shvurei Lev, the Umlalim, the Choylei Hagufa HaNefesh. He devoted himself to revivify, resurrect, revitalize the Sheres HaPleita in the DP camps, and in his capacity as the head of the religious department of the Joint Distribution Committee. He shipped into the survivors Tashmishe Mitzvah, Tashmishe Kedusha. He built yeshivos, he built mikvahs, and he continued to elevate and resurrect and breathe life into Yidden throughout his 7 storied decades of Rabbanos in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And together with my grandmother, Aleh Shalom, the daughter of the Rav of Sachachav, the last Rav of Sachachav, wherever they went, it was La Yehudim, Haisa Oira, V'Simcha, V'Sasain, V'Kar. They brought Simcha, V'Sasain, La Yehudim, Mishtav Yom Tov. Now these two, Udim Mutsalam Eyesh, these two firebrands who were saved from the furnace, did not know their birthday exactly, so they celebrated their birthday on Purim. Of course they did. They overcame the Zera Amalek, and therefore Purim was their Yom Tov and Purim was their birthday. Now, we read Megillas Esther in an Ibriyar, as this year is in Adar Beis, to juxtapose Geula leGeula, one redemption to the next, the redemption of Purim to redemption of Pesach. And Hashgacha had it that our Zayda, on the 15th day of Nisan, B'misas Nashika, he returned his soul to HaKadosh Baruch Hu after 106 years of Kedusha V'Tahara. And as we conclude, the rest of his life, V'chomasei Sakpai Ugvurasai Ufarashas Gedulas Mordechai Asher Gidloi Hamelech, they are inscribed. The rest of his story is inscribed on our heart and etched in our mind. So, on this special concealed and revealed event, and again you could go to the Art Scroll site, and if you want to order numerous copies, that's what I could tell that's what you're interested in doing. Just by the look on your face. I'm seeing that you want to order numerous copies. And you want to order Mishloach Manos. So that's what I'm going to discuss today. If you want to order numerous copies, there's a special promo code you could put in. Glatstein 22. You could get 10% off one copy, 15% off 1 to 4 copies, 20% off 5 copies or more. And you want to know, can I fulfill my mitzvah of Mishloach Manos by sending my friends, my neighbors, my enemies, my acquaintances? Can I be Mekayim the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos by sending them the concealed and the revealed? I knew you were going to ask that question, so that's what we're going to discuss in this special, the concealed and revealed event. It's interesting, the Beis Ephraim in Mailas Har Yuchsin, Ois Ches, he quotes the Ramah, that the Ramah, during a time of a plague, when there was no clean water in the city, he sent his father, his commentary to Megillas Esther. It's called Mechir Yayin, and he sent it as Mishloach Manos. Likewise, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz sent his classic commentary to the Megillah, Manos Halevi, to his father-in-law to Mekayim the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. So you're probably thinking, if the Ramah sent the Mechir Yayin and Rav Shlomo Alkabetz sent the Manos Halevi, then maybe I could send the concealed and the revealed. You know what? I like your way of thinking. I agree with that train of thought. But we're going to see that in this special Mishloach Manos that you send your friends, you might have to add a thing or two. And by the way, you could go to the Art Scroll site and they will offer you the concealed and revealed Mishloach Manos package. So you're saying, well, this sounds very much like a promotion for the new book, the Concealed and Revealed. Exactly, that is what this event is, and but we're going to give you some very important Divrei Torah as well. So here it goes. We're going to discuss the whole concept of Mishloach Manos, and we begin with, we're going to learn from the chapter on Mishloach Manos, the Machloikes Trumas Hadeshen and the Manos Halevi, plus 3 more reasons. This begins in your book on page 386. By the way, it's also available in the Lashon HaKodesh Sefer. It's Maimer Lamed Aleph in the Lashon HaKodesh Sefer, and that is available on our site with free shipping, rabbidg.com. So the Ramah Paskins in Or Chaim Siman Taf Reish Tzadi Hey, that if you send manos to your friend and your friend doesn't want to accept it, or your friend is moichelet, you're yotzei. And in the Darkei Moshe, he brings that the source of this din is in Mari Bruna, and the Pri Chadash wonders about this din. He says, how does the Ramah know that if you send your friend Shalach Manos and your friend is moichel, how does the Ramah know that you're mekayim the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos? So now the question is, what exactly is the machlokes between the Ramah and the Pri Chadash? That the Ramah in fact holds that if you send your friend Shalach Manos and your friend says thanks but no thanks, Ramah paskins, you are Yotzei, in Siman Tafrei Tzadi Hey Sif Daled. And the Pri Chadash asks, no, how does the Ramah know that to be the case? Comes the Holy Chsam Sofer, and the Chsam Sofer in Archaim Siman Kuf Tzadi Vav in his Truvos explains the machlokes, the Ramah and the Pri Chadash. And that is, the Chsam Sofer cites the Karban Nesanel in the first parak of Megillah, who answers the question of the Pri Chadash. The halacha is, if somebody makes a neder, and he says, I make a neder on condition that you give, unless you give my son a gift, you could be mater your neder by saying, I said you should give my son a gift. It's as if I already accepted it. And the Karban Nesanel writes, that's the makar of the Ramah. That the same way, if you make a neder, you could say, it's as if I already accepted it. So too, by Shalach Manos, you could say, well, you have to give it to me. It's as if I've already accepted it. However, the question of the Pri Chadash is still very salient, and that is because the Ran says that this halacha is dependent if the one who made the neder's kavana was to honor the giver or to honor the makabel. That if the mitzvah, if the neder is for the giver, so the giver gave it. If the neder is for the makabel, so the makabel did not receive it necessarily. And therefore, says the Chsam Sofer, the same question can be raised regarding Mishloach Manos. Namely, what is the function of Mishloach Manos? Is it for the giver or is it for the recipient? If it's for the giver, then the giver gave it. On the other hand, if it's for the recipient never actually received it. And now the Chsam Sofer explains even further. Because we find in the Poskim two main reasons for Mishloach Manos. And actually, this is quite a wondrous halachic innovation of the Chsam Sofer, where the Chsam Sofer identifies two particular reasons for Mishloach Manos, and he creates an entire world of halacha based on these two recognized reasons for Mishloach Manos. Reason number one is what is found in the Manos Halevi. The Manos Halevi in Parak Tes, Pasuk Tes Zayin, Parak Tes, Pasuk Chav Gimel, he brings that the reason for Mishloach Manos is Haman pointed out that we are a ununified, disparate, segmented people. We are yesh nayam echad mefuzar u'mefayrad bein ha'amim, and therefore to counteract Haman, and to show that in fact we have some unity, we give Mishloach Manos to create Ava v'achva v'shalom v'reyas. However, the Trumas Hadeshin in Siman Kuf Yud Aleph, he brings a shaila, and as is known, the Trumas Hadeshin actually made up his own shailos for Shalas Tshuvas Trumas Hadeshin. People who send their friends on Purim shirts and cloaks and so forth, are they Yotzei Mishloach Manos or not? In other words, are you Yotzei Shalach Manos with non-food items? Says the Trumas Hadeshin, it would appear that you're not Yotzei. Because the whole reason for Shalach Manos is so that people have food for their Suda, like the Gemara's Mashma in Masech Megillah Zayin Amud Beis, like Abaye bar Avin and Rav Chanina bar Avin, they would exchange their Sudais and they would be Yotzei Shalach Manos. So we see the reason for Shalach Manos is for a Suda. Therefore, if you send clothing or a non-food item, you are not Yotzei the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. So therefore comes the Chsam Sofer and he says this is exactly the machlokes, the Ramah and the Pri Chadash. The Ramah holds, like the Manos Halevi, that the reason for Shalach Manos is to engender Ahava v'achva v'sham v'reyas, to create goodwill. So if I come to your house with a beautiful basket and I offer it to you, even if you say, I already have 5 of those baskets and I don't need it, I don't need sugar, I'm on a diet, but I really appreciate the effort and the sentiment, so you engendered Ahava v'achva v'sham v'reyas, and you'll be yotzei in the midst of Shalach Manos, even if your friend did not agree to receive it, to accept it. However, and therefore the Rama paskins that if you're moichel your friend, you're yotzei the mitzvah of shalach manos. However, the opinion of the Pri Chadash who asks on the Rama, how does the Rama know in fact you're yotzei? The Pri Chadash holds like the Trumas Hadeshen, that the reason for shalach manos is to ensure that everybody has food for their Suda. Now, says the Chassam Sofer Chidush, the reason for Mishloach Manos is to ensure that everyone has food for their Suda. Then, what if I already have food for my Suda and I say thanks but no thanks? Says the Chassam Sofer, you will not be Yotzei Shalach Manos. The Chachomim had to be Masakein that whether you do have or you don't have, if someone offers, you need to accept so as not to embarrass those who don't have. And therefore, the Chassam Sofer even gives proof to this idea. We know at the end of Masechta Tainis it says that on Tu B'Av, that the girls would go dancing in the vineyards and the boys would come and select a kala, and everybody would wear the same garment, a white linen garment, and those who didn't have would wear, and even those who did have, would have to accept that garment so as not to embarrass those who did not have. So the same thing with Shalach Manos. If the purpose of Shalach Manos is to make sure everyone has food for the Suda, then if Shalach Manos is offered to someone who already has food, he would be required to accept it so as not to embarrass those who genuinely do not have. So therefore, says the Chassam Sofer, the Rama holds like the Manos HaLevi, that the reason for Shalach Manos is to engender Ava v'Yachva v'Shalom v'Reyos. And therefore, in a situation where you offer the Shalach Manos and your friend says thanks but no thanks, he's Moichel, you'll be yotzei the mitzvah of Shalach Manos. Mashein came according to the Trumas Hadeshen, that the Pri Chadash holds like, that the reason for Shalach Manos is to ensure that everyone has food for their Suda. So in that case, if you were to not deny accepting the Shalach Manos, you would not be yotzei, the giver would not be given, would not fulfill the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. This is how the Chassam Sofer explains the Machlokes Rama and Pri Chadash, and in doing so, Chassam Sofer really opens up new vistas in the whole world of Mishloach Manos. And let me share with you the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger in the Binyan Sia in Siman Mem Daled to explain and answer the Rama. Again, the question is, how does the Rama know that if you send Shalach Manos to your friend, and your friend does not accept it, you're yotzei the mitzvah? Says Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger that the Rama derives this from the fact that by matanos le'avyonim it says matanos, a gift, which implies something given and something received, as opposed to Mishloach Manos where it just says mishloach, to send. That discrepancy, that nuance of terminology, Mishloach, indicates that it doesn't have to be a gift. Your friend doesn't have to receive it. You just have to send it. And if you sent it, and then you did your part, and if your friend does not want to accept it, you would still be yotzei the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. And that explains why the Rama disagrees with the Pri Chadash, and the Rama holds if you send Shalach Manos, even if your friend doesn't want to receive it, you would be yotzei. But then the Aruch LaNer says maybe the reason why the Torah says Mishloach is to teach that you need to send Shalach Manos through a shliach. You shouldn't send it yourself, but you should do it through an agent. But the truth is, says the Binyan Sion, I always wondered, why don't any poskim bring down that you should give Mishloach Manos through an agent? This is not codified by any of the poskim. And you know why, says the Binyan Sion? It's probably because the reason the Torah says Mishloach is not to say you have to send it through an agent, but rather, for the first approach that we offered, that it's to teach that if you sent it and the recipient does not agree to accept it, you're still yotzei the mitzvah of Shalach Manos. And therefore the Binyan Sion seems to conclude that in fact you do not need to send Shalach Manos through an agent, which is a question on the Mishnah Berurah, because the Mishnah Berurah in Sim Tafrei Tzadi Hesev Katan Yirches quotes the Binyan Sion, and he quotes a Binyan Sion who has a suffix whether you're yotzei the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos if you don't send it through a shliach. And the Tzitz Eliezer in Chelek Tes Siman Lamed Gimel Ois Daled asks our very question, that a more careful reading of the Binyan Tzion yields that the Binyan Tzion is not mesupik, whether you yotzei the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos if you don't send it through a shliach, because the Binyan Tzion concludes that in fact the reason why it says Mishloach Manos is to teach the din of the Ramah, that if you send the money, even if your friend doesn't accept it, you're yotzei. The Binyan Tzion just concludes maybe it's l'charchila better to send it through a shliach, but not in any way that the Binyan Tzion is mesupik, whether you're yotzei the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. Halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah Berurah does bring it as a suffix, and Rav Shlomo Zalman said, no, you do not have to yimakveh to send it through shlichus. You can't be mechadesh dinim in Shalach Manos based on the reading of the pasuk. Especially, the whole purpose is to enhance friendship, and if anything enhances friendship, if you take the time to give the Shalach Manos yourself as opposed to doing it through a shliach. But now, as we mentioned, we have these two reasonings for Shalach Manos: the reasoning of the Manos Halevi and the reasoning of the Trumas Hadeshen. So regarding sending non-food items, the Ber Hetev in Sivkat and Zayin, Sim Tavrei Sadihei brings that if you could sell it for food, it would work. However, he brings from the Trumas Hadeshen that you would not be yotzei the mitzvah of Shalach Manos, and that is the psak of the Mishnah Berurah, that you cannot be yotzei the mitzvah of Shalach Manos with a non-food item. Contrary to the practice, what the Ramah did, and what the Manos Halevi did. So according to the Mishnah Berurah, you would not be able only to send the concealed and the revealed as a Mishloach Manos. So that's why you should go to the Art Scroll site and order the special concealed and revealed Mishloach Manos package. This way you could be yotzei according to all opinions. Now, very interestingly, it would seem that whether you could be yotzei Shalach Manos, a non-food item, would be dependent on the Machlokes Manos Halevi and the Trumas Hadeshen. And in fact, Shal Sechuvas Divrei Yisrael, Arachayim, Siman Reish Chaf Beis, he brings a shaila whether you're yotzei Mishloach Manos with a non-food item, and he says it would depend on this machlokes. According to the Trumas Hadeshen, that the whole reason for Shalach Manos is to make sure that people have food for their suda, so then, of course, you would not be yotzei the mitzvah with a non-food item. However, according to the Manos Halevi, that the whole purpose is to engender ava v'achva v'shalom v'reyos, so then l'chayra, you would be yotzei Shalach Manos with a non-food item. And it comes out very beautiful that the Manos Halevi himself sent the commentary Manos Halevi as a Mishloach Manos. You could possibly argue and say that even according to the Manos Halevi, that the reason for Shalach Manos is to engender Ava v'Achva v'Shalom v'Reis, but still Chazal were masakein to send a food item, and that is the manner in which we are mekayim the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. I just want to mention, as we started off with, that this year is sponsored by Chickens for Shabbos. Please go to the Yad Eliezer website. Please hit the icon for Agunois, Almonois, and Melamdim, and whatever you could do to support them. Tavei Aleichem Bracha. Here's another amazing nafkamina between the two reasonings of the Manos Halevi and the Trumas Hadeshen for the rationale for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. And that is, what would the halacha be if you sent Mishloach Manos, let's say today, and it arrived before Purim? So let's say you went to the Art Scroll site, and you ordered the concealed and the revealed Mishloach Manos package, and you specifically said, I want it to arrive on Purim. So you sent it before Purim, and it arrives on Purim. Would you be yotzei the mitzvah? And this is addressed in Shal Sechuvas Torah Lishma, Siman Kuf Peiches. These are the tshuvas of Rabbi Cheskel Kachli. Now, who's that? I never heard of him. Rabbi Cheskel Kachli is a pen name for the Ben Ish Chai. Cheskel Kachli is Gematria, the name of the Ben Ish Chai. And he said whether you send Shalach Manos early and it gets to your friend on Purim would be dependent on Machlokes Manos Halevi and Trumas Hadeshen. According to the Trumas Hadeshen, that the mitzvah is to ensure everyone has food for the Suda. So, in such a case, I sent it and it will arrive on Purim, and I made sure that everyone will have food for the Purim Suda, and you would be yotzei. But according to the Manos Halevi, that the reason is to engender Ava v'Achva v'Shalom v'Reyos. So that should be engendered on Purim, and l'chayra, then you would not be yotzei the mitzvah if you sent it before Purim to arrive on Purim. Now the Ramah, who paskins that if your friend is moichel, the shalach manos, you're not yotzei, that's because the Ramah paskins like the Manos Halevi, that the reason for shalach manos is to engender ava, v'achva, v'shalom, v'reyos, l'chayra, the Ramah would paskin that if you sent Mishloach Manos before Purim and it arrived on Purim, you would not be yotzei. Now I want to share with you the reasoning of the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan, Siman Tafrei Sadik Hey, Sivkan Yazayin, also is machmir, and he says you're not yotzei Mishloach Manos when you send it before Purim, and he says the reason is the reason for Shalach Manos is for simcha. And what simcha is there by sending it earlier? Now, l'chayra, this is a completely new reason for Shalach Manos. This is not the reason of the Manos Halevi to create Ava v'Achva. This is not the reason of the Trumas Hadeshen to ensure that people have food for the Suda. This is a new reason, Mishum Simcha. And within this reason, we can analyze and probe. Would one be yotzei the mitzvah if one sent it before? Would one be yotzei the mitzvah if your friend rejects the Shalach Manos? Or some of the other cases that we are going to discuss. What about, friends, if you send Shalach Manos anonymously and the recipient does not know who the giver was? Well, says Shas Teshuvas Ksav Sofer Or Chaim Siman Kuf Mem Aleph that this would depend on the machlokes Manos Halevi and Trumas Hadeshen. If the reason is like the Trumas Hadeshen to ensure that people have food for their Suda, so I ensure that people have food for the Suda, what does the recipient need to know? That it came from me? Who cares who it came from? But if the reason is to create friendship and goodwill, if the recipient has no idea who sent it to him, then it didn't create any goodwill, and certainly you would not be yotzei. And therefore the Ramah, who seems to paskin like Manos Halevi, that the reason for Shalach Manos is to engender Ava v'Achva v'Shalom v'Reyos, the Manos Halevi would seem to hold that if you give Shalach Manos anonymously, you would not be yotzei the mitzvah of Shalach Manos. I would like to share with you an approach to explain the Shita of the Ramah, that how is the Ramah so confident that the reason for Shalach Manos is like the Manos Halevi, to create Ava v'Achva v'Shalom v'Reyos, and the reason is not like the Trumas Hadeshen, that it's to make sure people have food for the Suda. I want to explain this, B'siyata D'Shmaya al Derech Drush, based on something I read in the writings of Hagoyin Reb Shlomo Varman, one of the great Mechabrim of our generation, Zechat Tzaddik Levracha, and he brings this in the Sheres Yosef Chelik Aleph, Siman Tes in Yanim Ketzarim, something, a Chiddush of Rabbi Menachem Zemba. We know that there is a discussion between the Rashbi and his Talmidim regarding the mitzvah, regarding why the Jews in the times of Purim warranted to be destroyed, that why they had this looming decree over their heads that they were going to be destroyed. And the Talmidim asked the Rashbi, Rabbi, why the Jewish people deserve to be destroyed? And the Rashbi said, you tell me. So they said, because they were nene from the Suda of Achashverosh. And the Rashbi said, nah, that can't be. Then only the Jews of Shushan should have been under the threat of annihilation. So the Talmidim said, oh, no, Rebbe, you tell us. And the Rashbi said, I'll tell you. It's because they bowed down to the Tzelem. So they said, Rashbi, so then why did Hashem have mercy on them? That's a serious crime. The Rashbi said they didn't really bow down wholeheartedly, and therefore Hashem's decree was not in earnest, and Hashem rescinded it. Says the Rabbi Menachem Zemba, so we have two reasons why the Jewish people warranted destruction in times of Purim. Either they were nene from the Suda of Achashverosh, or they worshipped Avodah Zarah. These two reasons are dependent on the two reasons of the Manos Halevi and the Trumas Hadeshen. If the Avera, the Jewish people, was their nene from the Suda of Achashverosh, the rectification, the tikkun for that is Sudas Purim. And therefore, Chazal were Masake in a mitzvah of Mishloach Manos to ensure that everybody has food for Sudas Purim. Mashein Kain. If the reason for the Gezerah on Klal Yisrael is because they worshipped Avodah Zarah. We know that there's a certain zechus that transcends and overrides Avodah Zarah, like Chazal say, Chaver atzavim Ephraim hanach loy. That when the Jewish people get together, bi'ava u'vi'achva, Hashem will be moichel even Avodah Zarah. So if the reason for the Gezerah of Haman was the Jewish people worshipped Avodah Zarah, then the tikkun for that is Shalach Manos according to the reason of the Manos Halevi. So perhaps we could suggest that since ultimately the reasoning of the Rashbi is correct, that the sin that deserved destruction was Avodah Zarah, then the authoritative, definitive reason for Shalach Manos is that of the Manos Halevi, namely to engender Ava v'Achva v'Shalom v'Reus, and in that case, the Ramah is able to paskin definitively that if your friend rejects the Shalach Manos, you are still Yotzei because you still engendered Ava v'Achva v'Shalom v'Reus. Because I love you so much, I want to share with you two more reasons for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. One was brought by the Rav Shlomo Gansfried in the Sefer Aperion. And Rav Shlomo Gansfried quotes the Rambam, who says the Iker mitzvah of Purim is the mitzvah of Matanos Lo'evyonim. As the Rambam says, it's better to increase Matanos Lo'evyonim than spend money on any of the other mitzvahs of Purim. And in that case, the Rav Shlomo Al-Kabetz wants to know why in the pasuk does it say Mishloach Manos Ishrayehu Matanos Lo'evyonim? Why say Shalach Manos first if the Iker mitzvah is Matanos Lo'evyonim? And Bechlal asks Rav Shlomo Al-Kabetz, what's the reason for Mishloach Manos? Why are we sending people baskets with jelly beans in it? So he says, because tzedakah is so important, and it's the Iker mitzvah of the day, the highest form of tzedakah is that it should be secretive, and the ani should not be embarrassed, and the ani should not be ashamed that he has to accept tzedakah. And therefore, if the only people who would be receiving on Purim would be aniyim, it would be quite embarrassing for the poor. So as a great cover-up, everyone gives gifts, not just Matanos Avyan, Mishloach Manos. So therefore, if somebody knocks on someone's door and leaves something, it's not embarrassing. Maybe it's Mishloach Manos. So Mishloach Manos is the setup to fulfill Matanos Avyonim in the most ideal sense. And therefore it says Mishloach Manos first, because that's the perfect prelude and setup for the great mitzvah of Matanos Avyonim. I want to share with you one more reasoning for the mitzvah Mishloach Manos. Rabbi Chiel Halevi of Oistroivtz, Tinyana, Purim, page 8. As we mentioned before, in the times of Purim, the reason why God ultimately rescinded the decree is because when the Jewish people bowed down to the Avodah Zarah, it was not wholehearted, it was half-hearted, and therefore Hashem said, you didn't really mean it, I will rescind the decree. Now here's the deal. I know that when I may have bowed down in the times of Purim, I didn't do it wholeheartedly, but my neighbor across the street, to me it looked like he's serving Avodah Zarah. I can't eat in his house anymore. He can't eat in my house. God looks in our heart and He knows that we didn't serve the Avodah Zarah in earnest, but the guy down the block, he did serve the Avodah Zarah in earnest. So I can't eat in his house. But when God made the miracle, and it became realized by the Jewish people that if God is rescinding the decree, that must be all of Klal Yisrael only serve the idol outwardly and not in earnest. So now we can eat in each other's house again. So now this was the first time people send gifts to each other, and therefore this was the precursor and the basis for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos. So the bottom line is that we have 5 reasons for Mishloach Manos. Number 1, the Manos Halevi, to engender Ava v'Achva, to counteract Haman, who said Yeshna Yam Echad, Mefuzar Mefayrad. Number 2, the Trumas Hadeshen, to make sure everyone has food at their Suda. Number 3, the Aruch HaShulchan, to engender Simcha. It's a day of Simcha. Mishloach Manos engenders Simcha. Number 4, we have the Aperion, Rosh Al-Kabetz. It helps set up Matanos Le'avyonim. And number 5, Rabbi Chiel Halevi of Oistrovs, Rabbi Meir Yechiel Halevi of Oistrovs, that the purpose of Mishloach Manos is to commemorate the fact that in times of Purim, people were again able to eat in each other's houses. And now that you know that the reasons for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manos, I am sure by sending your friend the concealed and the revealed, it will generate a lot of goodwill, it will create a lot of simcha, and even though technically it's not food for the Suda, but it will enhance the Suda, as every Suda has to have Divrei Torah. And we could say in the times of Purim, before the miracle of Purim, people could not exchange the concealed and revealed with each other. So this is a good commemoration. Now that we have the Yom Tov Purim, this gives us the opportunity again. All kidding aside, thank you for listening, and please take advantage of this new Sefer. I hope you enjoy it. You can get Lashon HaKodesh on our site, rabbidg.com, in English from the ArtScroll site, artscroll.com. And I want to thank my dear friends at Chazak, Reb Ilan Meirav, Rav Yaniv Meirav, Rabbi Aboff for hosting tonight's event. And of course, Chickens for Shabbos. Go to the Yad Eliezer site, hit the icons for Melamdin and Agunois and Almanois, and whatever you could do to be Mesameach other Yidden, then Hashem will give you and your Mishpacha Mishteh, Simcha, V'yom Tov, Kol Yemei Chayecha, Afrei Lechem Purim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.